again.
Mr. Powers, will you just say we're having some audio trouble?
I'm sorry?
Just say that we're having a little audio trouble and we're doing a test.
Okay.
Just say that.
Okay. We are experiencing a little bit of audio trouble, and we are just performing a test. We are experiencing a little bit of audio trouble. I'm sorry.
Okay, I got audio.
Okay. So yeah, so we're good now, except that we didn't get his intro. Okay. So we're good. So you can come back. We'll come back to you.
Just pick up right after the Star-Spangled Banner.
With apologies.
Want to apologize for the little technical snafu, although with a pandemic, it's probably typical, right? I want to thank Mr. Silitano and members of the Gibbons Middle School Chorus for that fine performance. In the last few years, the Pledge of Allegiance has become somewhat controversial, as the United States has been rightly challenged on its policies of inclusion for all Americans. I recognize and accept those challenges and realize that my perception of our country is seen through the lens of who I am, a white man. However, the Pledge of Allegiance is not about obedience to a particular president or to the imperfections of our country, but rather to a belief in the principles of our nation, with liberty and justice for all, and a dedication to never stopping until those principles have been fulfilled. Here to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance is Mr. Nash.
All right, if you could all stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Nash. Memorial Day is more than just a long weekend of cookouts. Here to tell us about the history and meaning of Memorial Day is Irina Kang of the Purple Team.
The Memorial Day tradition began near the end of the Civil War in the spring of 1865. Americans in various towns began to hold tributes to the fallen soldiers of the war by decorating their graves and reciting prayers. On May 5, 1868, General John A. Logan, a war veteran and leader of an organization called the Northern Civil War Veterans, called on the government to create a national holiday in remembrance of the fallen soldiers who died in defense of their country during the aforementioned war. May 30th was thus forth for, as he stated, Decoration Day, and it held true to its traditions for over a century. As America found itself embroiled in countless wars, holidays began to evolve to commemorate all the military personnel who died in defense. Memorial Day was henceforth created, a holiday made in honor of all the fallen arms for each war that the country had endured. In 1968, Congress passed the Uniform Monday Holiday Act, which established Memorial Day as a national holiday on the last Monday in May, and it was signed into law in 1971. Memorial Day remains a holiday wherein the citizens of America honor the fallen soldiers who had died protecting the integrity of the country.
Thank you, Irina. Our second musical performance will be America the Beautiful, performed by members of the Gibbons Middle School Orchestra, led by Mr. Christopher Brandt.
On Memorial Day, we honor those who have died in service to our country. They sacrificed their lives to protect our beautiful nation and our democratic and free way of life. The song, America the Beautiful, originally written by Catherine Lee Bates, portrays everything that they have sacrificed their lives for, from the natural beauties of America, its innate freedoms, and the democracy that we have here. Catherine was inspired to write America the Beautiful after she visited Pikes Peak, a large mountain top in Colorado. At the top, she was so awestruck by what she saw that she decided to write a poem describing how idyllic life in America is. Now, it is important to note that we would not be living in the America that was described in America the Beautiful if it were not for those that have lost their lives serving in the U.S. military. Their tireless efforts have, in some part, single-handedly been the reason that we have an America that is the way that it is right now. For instance, if they had not fought against the Axis powers in Europe during World War II and defended our democracy, there may not be an America right now. Catherine also believed in social justice and, among other things, women's rights. Both of these have become major issues in current times. Globally, the United States fares better than many other countries. In certain regions of Afghanistan, for example, women are not allowed to leave their homes without their husbands or their permission for fear of being murdered by an extremist terror organization. Those that have lost their lives serving in the United States military have prevented these kinds of organizations from spreading widely and globally, and therefore have indirectly protected the rights of many billions of people throughout the world. By serving in the military, they have not only protected the U.S., but indirectly, the whole world.
Thank you, Mr. Brandt and the Middle School Orchestra for a fine performance. Memorial Day is about reflection and remembrance of those who have died in battle. In 1863, our nation was involved in a bloody civil war that threatened to permanently tear our nation apart and eventually would see over 750,000 Americans killed by other Americans. At the Battle of Gettysburg, in early July of 1863, a three-day battle occurred in Pennsylvania in which the North barely managed to drive back a huge invading Southern force. When the battle was over 3 days later, nobody knew then that this battle would be the turning point of the war, only that over 50,000 men had died in fierce battle. 6 months later, President Lincoln gave a speech at the opening of a cemetery for all of those, on both sides, who died in the fighting for the nation. It is not a long speech, but one that is recognized as one of the greatest speeches by any U.S. president. That speech, the Gettysburg Address, will now be read by Nicholas Unkovich of the Green Team.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that this nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember, what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work, which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Thank you, Nick. Memorial Day is filled with a range of emotions, remembrance of days past and of lives lost. There have been many poems written to reflect these feelings and memories about the people who perished while defending our country. Here with one such poem is Jaden Yee of the Blue Team. He will recite the poem Memorial Day by Michelle Kime.
As we stand here looking at the flags upon these graves, know these flags represent a few of the true American brave. They fought for their country as people have through all of time, except that these soldiers lying here fought for your country and mine. As we all are gathered here to pay them our respect, let's pass this word to others. It's what they would expect. I'm sure that they would do it if it were me or you, to show we did not die in vain, but for the red, white, and blue. Let's pass on to our children and to those who never knew what these soldiers died for. It's the least that we can do. Let's not forget their families, great pain they had to bear. Losing a son or daughter, father or mother, they need to know we still care. No matter which war was fought, on the day that they died, I stand here looking at these flags filled with American pride. So as the bugler plays out taps with its sweet and eerie sound, pray for these soldiers lying here in the sacred, hallowed ground. Take home with you a sense of pride. You are here Memorial Day, celebrating the way Americans should on the solemnest of days.
Thank you, Jaden. Our next musical piece, called Lift Every Voice and Sing, will be performed by the Gibbons Middle School Chorus, led by Mr. Joseph Stilitano.
Voice and Sing was publicly performed first as a poem as part of a celebration for Abraham Lincoln's birthday by Johnson's brother John. In 1919, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, labeled it as the Negro National Anthem for its power in a voicing cry for liberation and affirmation for African American people.
The song is a prayer of thanksgiving for faithfulness and freedom, with imagery evoking the biblical exodus from slavery to freedom of the Promised Land. It is featured in 39 different Christian hymnals and is sung in churches across North America.
Let it resound loud as the roar.
Thank you, Mr. Silitano and members of our chorus. On January 20th of this year, our 46th President, Joe Biden, was sworn into office in Washington, D.C. As part of his inauguration, Amanda Gorham recited a poem called "The Hill We Climb," in which she reflected on challenges faced by her and by our country. We all have experienced challenges in our lives during the last 15 months, which have tested our endurance and which hopefully have culminated in our being stronger. As students of different teams read this poem, let us reflect on those challenges we have faced and how we are overcoming them even today. Reading the poem will be Sita Warner, Sawyer Kittredge, Aidan Lawyer, Ray Kassam, Amena Abdallah, and Pam Gonsalves. Sita?
When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find the light in this never-ending shade? The lost we carry, a sea we must wade. We brave the belly of the beast and learn that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of our country, in a time where a skinny black girl, descended from slaves and raised by a single mother, can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one.
And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine. But that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze, not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true.
That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to Glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare. It's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded.
But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption we feared at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while we once asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe, now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us?
We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Become the future. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and chain our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. Every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one.
We will rise from the golden hills of the west. We will rise from the windswept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. And every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn balloons as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it.
Thank you, everybody, for a very nice performance. Our last musical piece, performed by members of the Gibbons Middle School Band under the direction of Mrs. Karen Forrest, is appropriately last because of its meaning to those in the military. It is called Taps.
Hello, we are now going to have a performance of Taps. Taps is a trumpet melody, sometimes played by a bugle, at military funerals and in observance of Memorial Day. To give you a perspective on Taps and its origin, we will have Aditi Narayan from the Purple Team read you the meaning of Taps.
You may have seen a bugle or trumpet play a melancholy tune, followed by another bugle or trumpet echo in the distance at a military funeral or during a Memorial Day observance. This tune is called Taps. What is its meaning and historical significance? During the Civil War in July 1862, when the Army of the Potomac was in camp, Brigadier General Daniel Butterfield summoned Private Oliver Wilcox Norton, his brigade bugler, to his tent. Butterfield, who disliked the colorless, extinguished lights bugle call then in use, whistled a new tune and asked the bugler to sound it for him. After repeated trials and changing the time of some notes, which were scribbled on the back of an envelope, the call was finally arranged to suit General Butterfield and used for the first time that night. General Butterfield ordered that this should be substituted in his brigade and used as taps, meaning extinguished lights for the night. The next day, buglers from nearby brigades came over to the camp of Butterfield's brigade to ask the meaning of this new call. They liked it, and copying the music, returned to their camps. But it was not until some time later, when generals of other commands had heard its melodious notes, that orders were issued, or permission given, to substitute it throughout the Army of the Potomac for the time-honored call down from West Point. General Butterfield, in composing this bugle call and directing that it be used for taps in his brigade, could not have foreseen its popularity and the use for another purpose into which it would grow. Today, whenever a soldier is buried with military honors anywhere in the United States, the ceremony is concluded by firing 3 volleys of musketry over the grave and sounding with the trumpet or bugle with the meaning, "Put out the lights, go to sleep." There is something singularly beautiful and appropriate in the music of this wonderful call. Its strains are melancholy, yet full of rest and peace. Its echoes linger in the heart long after its tones have ceased to vibrate in the air.
We will now hear a performance of taps done by Will Edinburgh of the purple team and Sumed Kanakanchi of the yellow team.
Thank you, Mrs. Forrest, members of the middle school band. That always provides a very somber yet somehow satisfying end to the assembly. There are many people who need to be thanked for making this year's assembly possible, including Mr. Silitano, Mrs. Forrest, and Mr. Brandt, along with Westboro Television and the many students who performed. While not quite the end of the year, it is close enough to give us a perspective on where we have been these past 15 months. Much as a hiker on top of a mountain can marvel at their journey and see how they managed to get to the summit, we can look back at the many challenges each of us faced and how we struggled mightily to overcome them. It has been a year unlike any other, and I am in awe of the hard work and determination that has allowed all of us in the Gibbons community to get to where we are today. We are all looking forward to getting back to those kinds of activities that we enjoy doing, whether it's sports, going to the movies, being with our friends and families, or maybe just going out to eat. As you justifiably enjoy this 3-day weekend, please take a moment to remember that the reason why we have those normal activities to go back to is because other Americans have sacrificed so much for all of us. Thank you, and this concludes this year's Memorial Day Assembly.
3, 2, so you're doing your whole thing.
Welcome to Gibbons 2021 Memorial Day Assembly. From its beginning, this event has been a school gathering that has had several purposes. It started out as a way to express thanks and remembrance to those in our community who have fought for and sacrificed their lives so that we can have the rights and freedom we have today. This assembly has also served as a gathering of the Gibbons community, a time to recognize the excellence of our music programs and listen to the voices of our students speak many important words. Back in February, when Mr. Silitano and I first discussed the idea of bringing back this assembly in the midst of the pandemic, it became apparent to us that this year's Memorial Day Assembly would have another purpose. It would mark the beginning of a return to normalcy for all of us who have endured the last 15 months of this pandemic. It would be a recognition of our school being a single community dedicated to helping everyone survive during this very challenging period. Today you will hear from student speakers and musical performers about the meaning of Memorial Day, as well as the unprecedented experience of the pandemic. It is appropriate that the first musical piece of our assembly will be our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. Performed by members of the Gibbons Middle School Chorus under the direction of Mr. Joseph Stilitano, the Star-Spangled Banner tells the story of the survival of our flag and of our nation during the War of 1812. Witnessed by a 35-year-old lawyer named Francis Scott Key while aboard a British warship, this song was a poem before it was put to music and into the form we all recognize today.
All right.
Thank you.